I do think that people thrive more when they're walking in their purpose. You have to take this seriously. And if you're not willing to, you have to know that you're stunting your healing and there's only so much that I can do about it. Don't get so caught up in all the therapies and the practices and the protocols that you forget your higher power.
Welcome to the Health Insights Podcast. In this episode, we're joined by Alyssa La Scala, the founder of Biohacking Bombshell, a platform dedicated to empowering women through integrative health practices. Alyssa shares her inspiring journey from battling chronic health issues, including Lyme disease and mold toxicity, to becoming a sought-after health practitioner and coach. She discusses the evolution of her brand, the significance of community support in healing, and the often overlooked importance of nervous system regulation in overall wellness. Alyssa emphasizes the need for a holistic approach to health, addressing not just diet and exercise, but also emotional and spiritual well-being. This show is brought to you by Thea Health, dedicated to empowering individuals to take control of their health and well-being. Visit theahealth.ai to learn more. All right, let's dive into today's enlightening conversation.
Alyssa, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Let's start off with the number one question. Biohacking bombshell.
Yes.
Where did it come from? Was it very intentional?
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's polarizing? I just want to hear the backstory.
Yeah, I rebranded. Originally, my business was called Fit with Liz, and that was when I did a lot of nutritional programs and physical activity regimens. I would just do that type of programming for clients. And so I felt like Fit with Liz was appropriate during that time. But when I started to go through my own chronic health issues with Lyme and mold, and there was so much more to it, I got really into biohacking. And so I was looking at doing a little bit of a rebranding as well. Went through one of Russell Brunson's books and wanted to make it something that didn't have my name in it and that could, someone else could identify with the biohacking side of things. And then to me, Bombshell is just like a strong, powerful, like resilient woman. And so I wanted to make something with alliteration because for me that just is fun, and then be able to have something that really encompasses the type of work that we do, because we do a lot of biohacking and other work as well, but that was a big part of my transition at that time. And then of course, empowering women all around to be very strong, powerful disruptors in whatever they're doing.
I personally thought it was really smart because I follow a lot of people and I have a lot of friends in the health industry, but it's so easy to look, like when I think about you or I want to look something up about you, I'm like, I know exactly who it is. There's only one Biohacking Bombshell. And so I just wanted to say the name has been sticky ever since I saw it.
That's what I hear. I was hoping that, and we get that question a lot, like, what's it for? I was like, I want every single one of our clients to feel like they can put on that identity ultimately.
That's awesome.
And it was before biohacking was as much of a term as it was. It was really new then, and now everyone knows what it is, which is kind of nice. But
Yeah.
yeah.
No, awesome.
Yeah.
Walk me through what made you go down the route of becoming a provider, a practitioner, a trainer, a coach, etc. Like, what was there an inflection point? Was there an aha moment? Was it just something you intuitively knew that you wanted to do when you were younger?
Sure.
Were your parents a big influence? Like, give us that journey.
Yeah, because there's a lot of pieces to it, right? I always loved the health and wellness side of things. My dad got diagnosed with cancer when I was 8. And so for me, when I saw him, he was at 33, I believe at that time. He's still with us, today as well, thank goodness. But I saw an immediate shift in his lifestyle, in environmental variables. So that was my first experience with that and got to have a new appreciation for health. Then I also went through my own eating disorder bout between middle school and high school. And as I made it through that, of course, I realized that there were better ways to tend your body, take care of your body, make sure you stayed in shape. For me, it was just all about fear of gaining weight. And so overeating or undereating, over-exercising was basically like my catch-all, my safe space. And then I did a lot of damage to my body at that time. So then that was a learning lesson. And then I just got really into it. I went to school for exercise and sports science and got my bachelor's there and thought I was going to go into athletic training, or even physical therapy. And then in the midst of college, I went through Lyme disease, mold toxicity, et cetera. And it just brought me into that root cause chronic illness space, which is where I am at now as an integrative health practitioner. But I've always been into it. It's just what form is that? It's evolved over the years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple of really interesting things, right? You saw your father figure, the number one male in your life, go through one of the diagnoses that everybody hates to hear, and you said that he changed things like environmental factors, et cetera. How did he go about getting that information? Because like in the modern day, I think it's easier.
Yeah.
There's influencers such as
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
talking about these things. The algorithms are now showing people there's different sides to health and
Yeah.
different philosophies, right? Mm, It feels like your dad might have actually been an innovator here in terms of like understanding how to take care of his health versus just going to chemo, for example.
Yeah.
Did you have insights there? Did that make you curious? And what was his path there? I'd love to unbuckle that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question because at age 8, I wasn't as curious as I clearly would have been, years down the road. But I do know that within his local like community friend groups, and he was very involved in karate at that time. So in a community that was clearly very caring about their health and heard about the macrobiotic diet. Now, whether or not I'm not advocating for that or not, just to be super clear, because we know that the nutritional rabbit hole could be something we could have an entire podcast on. But for him, that was the shift that he did in tandem with conventional treatments. So he did still go down like the chemo and radiation route. It was very hard to watch. But I do believe, and he will say that to this day, that the only reason he was able to get through that was because of how much he supported his body nutritionally during that time, and very grounded Christian in prayer, immersed in the church. So having the spiritual health and the nutritional side that I don't think is in that conventional space encouraged much was what got him through.
That's an interesting point, right? Because
Yeah.
I sometimes people talk about, oh, what's the perfect diet? What's the perfect supplement? What's the perfect drug? And maybe this is something I would love your opinion on or your viewpoint. The fact that somebody's supporting you and saying you can do this, I feel like just is the least talked about thing with
Yeah.
the most needed in the time that I think everybody can resonate with. Everyone's been sick at their whether you got drunk and were throwing up in Mexico at that time of throwing up, you're like, I just want my health back,
Yes.
right? And I wish somebody would help me, and you
Yes.
want sympathy.
Mhm.
So I think that's a great point, and maybe is there a correlation between what you do and how you support people that resonates, and that how your father had that whole support group behind him? Do you feel like that was a huge contributing factor, and it still is?
Yeah. One thing that will always stick with me was a conversation that he had with one of his chemo nurses when he went in. He came home and told me that it was the first time he met this nurse. Those nurses, like, bless their hearts, got him through that. I think it's a very unappreciated area when it comes to like the health space, is these chemo nurses that give them such support. I remember when he came home and said that she had asked him, "Do you have a higher power?" And he said, he was a Christian. And she was like, "Good, because I was going to say, if not, you better find one." And that was how you were going to be able to get through it, regardless of the treatments that they were doing there or anything else. And that's something that I really try and bring into my practice. We work with all different types of clients, all different types of religions, but to remember that and to make that a very
Yeah.
core part. I like to say, don't get so caught up in all the therapies and the practices and the protocols that you forget your higher power
Yeah.
and that you take it on as your own. So not only, yes, the community for support, but are we spiritually grounded? That's a huge part of what I try as much as I can, respectfully, if a client's comfortable with it, to be able to bring that into our conversations.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to touch on a higher power versus a goal and the difference there.
Yeah.
So, for example, what's a concrete example I can give you? Like when men retire at 65, a lot of them die, right? Like statistically, it's like the day you retire is like your highest chance of death. And some of the advice that I hear is like, you should go get a physical and make sure. And I'm like, my opinion is it's not the physical. Like you're the same person you were yesterday. It's that your job was your identity to provide for your family, so you can travel the world if you want, whatever it is that you're doing, have beer with the boys. But like they lose that identity and then they're like, what am I if I'm not this?
Exactly.
And therefore I'm done. So in that sense, that was their identity. But then there's people who are like, well, I'm striving towards X, right? I'm striving towards having a family. I'm striving towards being a successful business person. Would you say that equally those are important, that you need both, one or the other is better, or it doesn't matter as long as there's some drive, whether it's a higher power or a goal that is the key?
That's a really good question. I feel like for me, the higher power is non-negotiable. So it's not either or. Like that's an absolute for
Absolutely.
me. Um and then I think that whatever God has called to put on your life, whether it is, for women showing up as the best, mother, pouring into your children, raising them right, to tend to the house, or to be a businesswoman, or for men, to be a provider or whatever it may be. I do think that people thrive more when they're walking in their purpose. So being aligned with your higher power, being aligned with God, is the way that I think that you're going to be accurate when it comes to doing that. You may think that your purpose is one thing, and God may think it's something else. So I think that, the first is most important. And then when it comes to walking in your purpose and striving to do that in the best way possible, yes, I think that's a parallel.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Going back to something else that you said, and I think this is important, I like to extrapolate this out of providers, is you had your own personal struggles. And I think that's important for people to know, because it's like, is there a way I can resonate with this person?
Yes.
Sometimes providers are looked at as it's this snooty person that did this degree for X amount of years and they think they know better than me. But when they find out a lot of practitioners or people in the healthcare field actually had problems and got into it to help is very useful. So could you unpack, how did you get into a state where, what were some of the, maybe the pressures or the environmental things and internal battles you had in terms of, if I eat too much, it's not a good thing. I need to exercise all the time. Like, how did you get to that point? Was there certain situations that led to it? Was it the way society was at the time where you grew up?
Yeah.
What were some of those things, and how did that come about?
For the eating disorder side of things, I feel like it's incredibly common when you're trying to find yourself and your body is shifting, especially as a female in those middle school, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, grade. So for me, that's a big part of what it was. And not to lump you all together, but boys are brutal. Girls are brutal too. But when there's less buffer, there's no emotional intelligence. I mean, it's very minimal. So when it comes to comments that whether, the guys or girls would say it to you, like those are just rough years. And so those are some of the most common years that you end up seeing disordered eating during the most common bullying years. So not that I necessarily was bullied. I was teased about certain things. I think everyone would be in some way, shape, or form. But for me, it was also something I could control. And so my body was something that I took a lot of pride in. Both my parents were very active, so it wasn't like a foreign concept. But for me, I think it was more of my parents were divorced. My dad was sick. It was something I could control, in combination with the fear of giving anyone in my peer group a reason to make fun of me. And I felt like if I was fit, I would be less likely to be bullied or be, more desired as a friend. So that definitely played a role.
I think it's a great point, because whether people want to believe this or not, the truth is good looking people get treated differently. They have higher confidence. They typically achieve more. They get higher pay raises. It doesn't, whether we like that or not is irrelevant. It's just the truth,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's a good point. I think there's a lot of pressure for people to look good, to present well, to be hot or pretty or whatever the case is. And do you feel like, since you had those problems, they've gotten worse over the years, maybe through the patients that you see? Like, do you feel like they have this pressure on them? And maybe the best proxy to that point would be, now in social media,
Yep. That's exactly what I was thinking.
you present the best self. You take the angles, and I'm talking about everybody. Like,
Oh, yeah.
when I'm taking a photo, I'm like, that looks terrible. Or
Especially when you have a brand and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
marketing, absolutely. But
Right.
it's become this thing that you don't even have to have a brand. You can just it's just another way for us to feel like valued and fulfilled and desired, is to get a like or get more comments or get more views on something. I think it has to be worse. Like we would have you can see in movies, and you would have TV shows, and of course you have magazines and things like that, when I was growing up. But now you can't scroll through reels that aren't filtered and girls that are dancing and look attractive. And it's just, I can't even imagine, honestly, growing up when that was the case. I do think it would have been 10 times harder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you seeing that with maybe some of the clients that you guys take on, or?
Not necessarily. I have a huge age gap between myself and a half brother. And so I just know him being 19 and just being able to see a little bit of his world. And I know the stories, and I've gotten to know like a lot of his, friends who are girls, and I've witnessed it more that way. So
Gotcha.
I think that it's definitely part of a conversation that I've had with some of my clients, but a lot of mine have been so sick that, yes, the comparison trap can happen there, and I'm sure it's impeding on them. It's just in a different way. Like when you have someone that has such extreme chronic fatigue that you literally struggle just to think about rolling out of bed, and can't show up for your kids or can't go to events. It's not as much like aesthetically focused for a lot of people then as, maybe middle schoolers or high schoolers now that
Fair.
are having that. You know what I mean?
Totally. No,
So,
that's fair. Well, it's like you don't care about anything when you're sick. You just
yeah,
want to get better, and
all that matters
that's
is your
the
health.
that's the only thing. We just need to always be reminded of that,
Yes.
unfortunately. And I'm saying all of us.
Yeah.
Let's go into, I'd like to unpack a little bit more that journey of, now you're in the functional, let's call it the functional slash holistic slash looking at the core root of issues,
Yeah.
medicine field. What made you go that route versus more of a, let's just call it traditional medical doctor or practice?
Yeah.
What were your decision-making criteria and points as you were going through your career to get
Yeah.
to this level?
Well, I wanted to get my bachelor's in exercise and sport science just because I knew, especially with that school, it was very well rounded. So no matter where I wanted to go afterwards, I figured I'd probably have to go for my master's or my doctorate. Initially, that was my plan. But at least I had a great bachelor's as a base, and then I could kind of figure out what I liked as I was going through school. But I ended up deciding I was going to go the physical therapy route, went and did internships. I just realized I didn't like it that much. It was not fulfilling enough for me to be like, and I now have to go do 3 more years to get my doctorate here. So I just ended up taking a year off. I went and worked with a company called Are You Fit to do biometric screenings in different cities every day. I was a personal trainer at that time. I was nannying. I was bartending at Texas Roadhouse. I was doing whatever I could to just make money and start paying off my student loans, while at the same time really heavily navigating Lyme and mold toxicity. A lot of this stuff I didn't know until years later, right? But that's ultimately what it was. So, my initial plan was to take some time and then probably get into the physical therapy realm. Then I didn't like it. And then I got so sick. And after I wasn't getting answers from conventional practitioners, I wasn't going to go that route because I'm like, they're not helping me. Why would I want to get into a space where I feel like they can't even solve my problems? And so then I found out about the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute and ended up going down that route, and super grateful for that.
How did you stumble upon that? Because even
Someone's
today.
Instagram.
Oh, really?
Social media has so many areas that I think, setting false expectations, and it's everyone's highlight reel, but the accessibility to information can be a pro and a con. But yeah, I saw someone that I followed in health space post about it, and I'm like, I want to do that. And I looked at it and I did, and it was that easy.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think it was a God thing.
Yeah. So it popped up at the right time.
Yeah.
You had all these issues. You're like, let's explore and see if this is gonna help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Started researching and decided that was my path.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then when you went down that path, you obviously got better and you felt better and you were still excited about the medical community. I'm sure that unlocked some insights that you didn't have. What was your thought process, or how did you pivot to doing what you're doing today?
Yeah. I mean, as far as my integrative health practitioner journey, I was fully virtual at that point. So it was actually 2016. I had decided when I was simply doing nutrition regimens, workout programs, I wanted to do it virtually. And it was mostly because I was exhausted because I was still dealing with, Lyme, mold, et cetera. And going in person, it just wasn't something that I wanted to do, nor did I feel like my body could keep up. So I started telehealth, was doing that before COVID made it cool, So that's what I was doing, but I was just doing that type of programming. And then I ended up transitioning a couple years later into the integrative health practitioner space. So having a virtual practice, if you will, is something that I have had for a while. It was just the type of client that I was working with and the focus that we took.
Gotcha. I'd love to dive into some of the things that you're seeing with clients. So,
Sure.
is there some commonality of things? Maybe it could be 2, 3, 5, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. It's the common modality of people getting sick. So is it environmental? Is it mostly diet? Because right now, everyone's trying to make a decision on how they improve their health.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's this diet or that diet, then there's, you should take these supplements. No, you shouldn't take these supplements. There's drugs now that help you lose weight.
Yep.
There's different philosophies of how you should live your life. There's environmental. So are you seeing things more than others that are popping up that are more common in your clients than not?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that mold toxicity and pesticide exposure are like the top things that I see. And then,
Interesting.
of course, that increased toxic load is making parasites more of a problem, causing nervous system to be more dysregulated. Drainage pathways are more stagnant, right? So those are some of the most common things when we're running like a total toxic burden panel, for example, that we see when you're having higher pesticides. There's heavy metals in those as well. So it just adds to their overall load. I would say I think one of the things that it's the least sexy for people, but it needs to be more talked about is the nervous system regulation side of things. And I pray that that becomes, especially since COVID and the state of our world that it's in, I pray that this becomes more of a foundational thing that is talked about earlier on in someone's healing versus later.
Yeah.
Now, when you have a high toxic load, that's going to also contribute to nervous system dysregulation. So I get that. But so many people that we meet are like, I have mindful thinking. I read personal or self-help books. I pray. And I'm like, those things are all great, but that's not the same as talking about limbic system retraining or vagus nerve work and somatics to make your body feel safe. And I think that's a really big cap in someone's healing, whether it's knowing how to handle social media and other stimulants, or whether it's retraining your body of how to respond to exercise or certain foods, people that have 5 foods that they can eat. Or I have clients that react to water,
Yeah.
clean water.
Which is crazy.
So yeah, but you hear mast cell, the awareness of that going up and people understand the extremeness of that. And, all the toxicity plays a role, but if we're not regulating our nervous systems, and it's not sexy and not one set way to do it. And so I think that because of that, we just don't talk about it as much.
Gotcha. I want to unpack 2 things there, but let's stick with the nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
Probably the least talked about thing on earth. What specifically causes people to stay dysregulated, even if they're, let's use the examples you gave. Hey, I'm already doing meditation. I'm already mindful. I'm already reading these books, but it's not working.
Right.
What is the reason that it's not working?
I think because you have to take such a full spectrum approach, because this was me as well when I had a friend of mine say, you need to go through X program. And I'm like, but I feel relatively emotional intelligent. I feel like I have wisdom from rough experiences that I had at like an early age on. I feel like I'm a positive person and I do read a lot of, self-help books. I'm very immersed in my faith. I'm in the word. So how could I possibly need to do more? And it's just that you don't know what you don't know until you end up going through a program that is all encompassing, teaching you about awareness, teaching you how to retrain your brain to body and body back to brain with those messages. You just don't know until you go through it. Kind of like you just don't know a lot of the stuff in the functional medicine space until someone shares it with you. And I really think it's about building that trust with the client to help them to understand there is more to it than what you believe.
Yeah.
So I don't think that some people will just avoid it. I do think a lot of people do truly believe that they're doing the very best that they can for nervous system. They just don't know any different because it's so broad, right? We're not talking about it enough. People don't understand all the moving parts to nervous system regulation.
Gotcha. What would be some of the ways that anybody listening could explore if they have nervous system dysregulation, in your opinion, or the ways that you've seen it come up?
Yeah, honestly, my favorite program is Regulate by Primal Trust by Dr. Kat. I think she has created the most all-encompassing program that I have seen. And so, because if I say, go and do vagus nerve exercises, or look up somatic therapy, or look up trauma processing, I feel like it ends up, and we do this in other spaces as well, like let's just address mold, let's just address parasites, and it becomes this whack-a-mole healthcare where you're just chasing that one thing. And so I think as much as you can, ideally working with a practitioner, an expert in the space that's able to look at all these moving parts and say, here's what I think is going to be most helpful for you, will help to accelerate your results there. But outside of that, if you're going to do a self-navigation route, choose a program that you know is all encompassing so that you have all the tools in your toolbox and you can selectively pull.
How long does it typically take? I know you're gonna love this question. Is there a timeline that you've seen that's common? Is it extremely individual? Is it
To re-regulate?
to re-regulate? It depends on how multiple variables? Like,
Yeah.
is there some commonalities that maybe you've seen that are holding true, or is it really depends who you are and what's going on?
I think it really depends. And there's a lot of layers. We're ongoingly learning how to understand our bodies better and regulate. So I don't think it's ever an end destination. But of course, that's the question, especially with chronically ill clients, is when am I going to get better? And it could be this route, it could be detox route. But I've had some clients I refer to regulate all the time. And I've had several clients go through just the first training and say, that was absolutely life-changing. And it was like a 40-minute initial assess. Like they had so much new awareness of themselves that it was groundbreaking.
Right.
And so I think just different phases, like I know for me, going and doing like eye exercises and vagus nerve work was some of the most influential that I could do. For someone else, when they're getting to parts work a little bit later on, that's going to be the most influential. So I just like to set up the expectations and just help people to understand that I would go into this saying, give it at least a year. Not to say that you're not going to see results along the way, but I think people expect it to be way faster because we live in this Amazon Prime world, right? Like you get results in 2 days, you get everything you wanted. Like, no, it's just not going to happen. This is probably going to be the thing that you have to be the most patient with.
Yeah. I saw a post of yours, which I resonated with deeply, which said, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, so correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You've been sick for like 30 years, and then you expect to get better in a month.
Yep. Taking Adderall, birth control, this, that, burning candle at both ends, people pleasing, and you think that you're supposed to be better in, it was like 90 days or something like that. Yeah, but we have to set those expectations.
Totally. And I couldn't agree anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's just like completely, and when you tell somebody like, hey, you've destroyed your body for 30 years, is it reasonable to assume it's going to be fine in a week? Then they kind of feel like I
But
shouldn't
people
be an ass.
know that, right?
Yeah.
Like they know, they just don't like it.
Of course.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Because if I can get it today, why wouldn't I, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of technology, modern innovations have been built on convenience for
Of
humans.
course. Yeah.
Which is great. Like those technologies are awesome. It's just everything has a pro and a con, especially if it's a tool. And every marketing company tries to get you to realize that something is going to happen faster, or at least it's perceiving that it's going to happen faster because they know you won't buy otherwise.
Yes.
Because your competition is everybody else telling them.
Yeah.
Right. And so then you're actually in a really hard place where you have to get a result or make sure that the result is clear and then remind them of it all the time, because I think the stat is crazy. It's like 10,000 ads a day everybody sees, just like subconsciously, right? Because if you're walking down the street, you don't even know it, but all those billboards, it's like 1,000 ads just walking down the street, right? And it's subconscious. Nobody really notices it, except the big brands know that, so they'll like just keep top of mind, right?
Right.
Awesome. Let's say we do the work and we get nervous system regulator, at least on the path.
Yeah.
The other two big ones were pesticides, right? Talk me through some of the ways you're seeing people get a lot of pesticides into their body. Is it, hey,
Well, they could go ahead and have like personal use with like Roundup, even though my mom, like she still has it at her house. And I'm like, I've told you literally how the glyphosate, is trying to essentially like, replace the glycine in her joint, and she has horrible joint issues. And I'll give her an exact correlation of how that toxin is ruining her health, and she still uses it for convenience. So not only are people using it around their homes, there's so much of that use just on, schools, on like local fields, farms, nurseries. So those are a lot of places, and as well as, chemtrails and different things like that. having different types of exposures with a lot of these toxins as well. So those are some of the most common ones that I see, but a lot of people are not cleaning up their water. And so, even if you feel like you don't have environmental exposure in that way,
Yeah.
if you're not doing, quality, I'm a big advocate for distilled water, and that could be an entire other debate of an entire podcast. But if you're looking at totally removing, the glyphosate, the atrazine, et cetera, you could be using a Brita and thinking you're good, or even RO, even
Yeah.
reverse osmosis, and thinking you're good. And so I think that's one of the primary ways that people are being exposed. But yeah, absolutely, in or around their homes. That there's so many kids that actually are having way more injuries, way more ACL tears, way more hip joints, way earlier on,
Yeah.
and or even like pet cancer, and you're thinking about like them walking and getting glyphosate on their paws. So I mean, this is manifesting in all different areas, but our usage of it has skyrocketed.
I have an interesting correlation here that's coming to mind. You have the perfect example of how the human brain is very not intelligent. There's ample examples of how our brain is very intelligent. We're right now on the 20th floor of a building overlooking 10,000, like 1,000 other buildings. That was innovation that 1,000 years ago would have been absolutely, they would have never even guessed that that's possible.
Right.
But your mother, who you have explained to numerous times that this is actually something that's causing the pain that you don't want, still uses it because her brain goes, yeah, but I don't want to deal with the damn weeds. And this is easier, so just keep doing this. So it by the convenience of not having to do that work bypasses anything else. Do you feel like if your nervous system is regulated, you can make decisions like, okay, I understand that this is bad for me, so I'm just gonna do the weeds a different way? Or is that brain pathway that strong that even if your nervous system is good, you still want to be lazy, and so therefore there's things that you don't want to let go?
For sure. I mean, I think that I've met some very regulated people that I still wouldn't agree with their decisions. And to me, they're not still logical, but they're regulated as they're making them. I do think for most people, like they'll operate from a more logical perspective.
Yeah.
I do absolutely agree with you that going and trading efficiency at that point when you're more regulated, you'll probably be less
You're more
likely to.
you're more prone to make the right choice.
Yes.
Now let's get into the fact that even if you're regulated, you still are gonna make the wrong choice, i.e. your mom using that Roundup. Is there strategies that you've implemented with your patients, clients, etc., where you're able to break through to them finally or get through them? Or is it more of a case of the pain has to be 10 out of 10 for them to just even physically not be able to use that product to finally stop and then have that realization? Like, and this is an honest question
Yeah.
because I've seen this a lot too. And I can say, like, I've done some health coaching for people with IBD, and if they don't want to do it, like what I'm telling them, no matter how much they trust me, no matter,
Yes.
like, if they're not in actual pain, they go back to their old habits. And unless they change that environment or do the things that I'm telling them, they're not going to. And it's like, at some point, you just can't help that person,
Yeah.
right? So I'd love to unpack if you have examples or things that you found that have been very useful at, like, cutting through and being like, listen, like, has to happen, and here's how we're gonna do it.
Yeah. I will say that you can say that. You can go ahead and show someone something on a lab. You can go ahead and bring up all the research to say how it's impairing their body. Most people, until they are uncomfortable themselves or they're witnessing, a lot of times I'll see like a child or a parent or a spouse that they're like, I don't want that to happen to me. And it becomes like a mirror for them. It's fear. Like there's some type of fear that's typically going to be driving them.
Yeah.
Rarely do I see people that are being super proactive, or they're only proactive because, again, they've witnessed somebody else go through, so much pain, like me, maybe watching my dad go through, years and years of cancer treatments and things like that. But no, sometimes I will just have to get super real and just say, this is what your labs say. These are the patterns of dysfunction that can often be tied to XYZ. You need to take this seriously. And I feel like when I was going through my first functional medicine practitioner, I wish he would have been that upfront with me. For me, it was, I would not back down
Yeah.
from how intensely I was working out.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't in an eating disorder stage by any means, but I was also like fresh out of the bodybuilding world. Exercise was still my release, but it was I mean, I was on thyroid medication. I had to take hydrocortisone Cortef tablets every day because my cortisol was so poor. And it's like, I should not have been training the way that I was.
Right.
I remember him saying to me, I know you're going to do it anyway. So I'll just tell you, you're going to have to take, 10 milligrams more or whatever of like XYZ.
Yeah.
And I wish he would have just been real. And this is what I do with my clients. And I tell them that story. And I'm like, I am not going to put you in a position or encourage you or enable you to be in a position where 5 years down the line, you're going to be so much worse than you are now. So you have to take this seriously. And if you're not willing to, you have to know that you're stunting your healing. And there's only so much that I can do about it. And you have to kind of feel out the person about when they're ready for that, because some people are just not at that spot. But it's a conversation that needs to be had. And if we started coming at it and I say, I'm telling you this because I care about you, and this is what we're realistically looking at,
Yeah.
you can start to evoke maybe more emotion, even if they're not quite there yet.
Right. It's an interesting point because I feel like the reason you can get to that point with somebody is because they trust you.
Yeah.
And you have rapport with them, and they feel like you have their best interest in mind, and like see you as an authority figure in the scope of you're taking care of my health, and you know the game plan better than I do. I think this is sometimes a miss with people who don't have that person in their pocket, right? Like if a technology or an article tells you something, you're like, I don't really care. I just read this. I'm gonna go back to my old lifestyle. Do you feel that that is becoming even more important today, where everything's trying to get automated and, I'll just read my own stuff and take care of myself? Do you feel like that connection is very important, just
Yeah.
especially for these scenarios where it's like you're not doing the right things?
Yeah.
And so we need to scare you. Unfortunately, right? Like moving away from pain or going towards pleasure. Unfortunately, pain motivation is way better.
Yeah.
Almost nobody cares about going towards pleasure, right? Because if they're even comfortable a little bit, they'll just say it'll happen in the future, and it won't,
Yeah.
because they're not working towards it. But it's like that pain. So do you feel like that is true and becoming even more true?
Yeah, I think both have to exist. You can have someone be very, very driven because they imagine being able to be more present with their kids and not snapping at their kids, or, enjoy family vacations or go for a walk outside. So, people can say, oh no, it's the positive things that pull me. Cause I'm saying this because I feel like some people could listen to this and may disagree with saying like pain has to be part of it, but that's the reality, that's what's pushing you there because you don't have that yet, and that causes you a pain. I do think that having that trust with someone and being able to be honest is important, especially because the information that we have it is endless. And one of the biggest things that we hear in our clinic is, one day this is healthy for you, one day this is not. And then you can do this, and then you can use that product, and then you find out that it has PFAS chemicals in it. It's overwhelming. So if you can build that trust and help to really reprioritize for someone and make it so that you're clarifying things and reducing the overwhelm, I think that's an important piece too, because some people have such analysis paralysis that they will do nothing, even if they are in fear, and then they'll just stay there. So
Amazing. Did want to dive a little bit into, I think you have a very, very good strategy of reaching people, which is why you have a very big following online. Maybe the best way to broach this topic is to give an example. I think one of your recent posts was, it started off saying, "Let's do some small talk," and then you're like,
they're poisoning our food.
Yeah, that was your
my version of doing small talk. Did you know that they poison our food?
And this is hilarious, right? And even if you're not part of this, like you're not in the industry of integrated medicine or whatever, you're gonna see that and laugh, no matter what, and then you might explore the content. What was your vision behind your content and how you reach people? Do you feel like the humor extremely like helps like lower people's mechanisms of defense to be like, no, I don't want to listen to this, or this feels scarier in you, or did you kind of stumble upon into that?
Yeah, sometimes it just depends on what I feel I'm in the mood to share at that point, as far as just like the type of client that I want to attract. I mean, I have all different types of of content on there, and even just what's going on in the world. Like, do I feel like we need something funnier right now? Because there's a lot of heavy stuff going on, and I feel like we just need humor.
Yeah.
I don't know. When I first started my Instagram, I mean, years ago, it was just for me and my pictures, and then it ended up transitioning into very results driven sharing when I was doing weight loss programming and things like that. And then of course it transitioned into how can I share content that the person that was in my shoes can relate to.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times it's like chronic illness humor or functional medicine humor, or just getting like, I'd be so transparent as to share pictures of parasites on my stories. I mean, I wanted to just be as transparent as possible, and just to be able to bring a level of relatability that, like you said, there's so much that's out there that if someone can't resonate with you, it's not going to click. So whether it's humor or whether it's being the person that you're always seeing parasite pics from, or whatever it may be, I just wanted to be real, and I don't think we have a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think that always comes out, right? Like it as long as somebody feels like you're not making something up, or you're not just putting something out there just because you think it looks good,
Yeah.
they immediately lower the defenses and are able to at least listen to you, or maybe be more open-minded,
Yeah.
which I think you do a great job of. So I did want to give you congrats on that.
Well, thank you. I try and bring humor in as much as possible, because when you're talking about chronic health issues, it gets so heavy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You're going to offend someone. Like, literally, if you're trying not to offend anyone, then don't do or say or think anything.
Right.
And it's like, you just got to be okay with it. Doesn't mean it's easy. I mean, it's rough sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's more important
It
to
comes
make
with
people
the
feel heard.
territory.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect.
Exactly.
Couple more things. How are you using technology today to help get better patient outcomes, maybe make your practice more efficient? Is there things that have been very helpful for you that you found that make things just run smoother, get better outcomes,
Yeah.
automations,
Sure.
reminders, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very loaded question, right? I mean, we use countless different things. So we will automate as much as we can to make sure that it's a more predictable, it's easier on our team, and it's a more predictable experience for our clients. So we use Practice Better. In Practice, do as many automations through there as well. We use Go High Level, do as many automations there as we can too. But we still try and keep the human component as much as possible. So as far as, communication back and forth, we haven't transitioned to having like AI doing all of our customer support or things like that. But we'll use, Chat GPT where we need to, especially when it comes to different content ideas, things are going to be performing well. But yeah, those are the primary ones that we use.
I actually think that's a really valid point. Even with our company, we made a distinct decision that our support team is never automated. It's always a human answering for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're dealing with a lot of health data, which is very highly sensitive. And then number two, we're dealing with people that health is either they're trying to better it, or get healthy from being sick,
Right.
which is the most sensitive topic there is outside of, an attack on a family member, and you have to pay attention to that. So it's like, you really lose if you're trying to automate everything. You really lose where you're building trust. And so I want to say again, I feel like that's such a great move on your team's part, and everything else is almost like table stakes
Yeah.
of if it's more efficient, it's more efficient.
Yeah.
So, I
Whatever
think,
you need to do to best serve people, which is what you guys are doing. I was just having the conversation with Emma this morning, because there is so much automation that's happening with client support, customer support, and it is important for us to just keep that a very personal experience. I know whenever I'm calling something, if I'm trying to figure out if I want to buy this service, or if I trust these people, it drives me nuts if I have to take 20 minutes to go through hoops and finally get to an operator, right?
Right.
So we never want to do that. The only time I do believe in automation, if needed, to be able to serve people at scale, like we use ManyChat, is a big thing to be able to get different resources and things out to people, especially when you have a big following. But that's probably the closest that we will get to that. We like to keep that one-on-one experience as much as we can.
Amazing. This was an awesome podcast. You were an awesome guest with a wealth of information. Where can people find you and interact with you?
Yeah, Biohacking Bombshell is going to be the handle on Instagram. Biohacking Bombshell is also our, Facebook name on YouTube as well. So you can find me on all three of those platforms.
Amazing. We'll link those below, and it was an absolute pleasure having you, and we'd love to have you again, because there was lots of topics that we could have gone another hour on.
Let's do it.
Perfect.
Thanks, Forrest.
Thank you.